Hello, everybody. Welcome to day 4 of ATSV, Apparel Textile Sourcing Virtual. I've never actually said day 4 because traditionally it's a 3-day sourcing event, but since we're doing it virtual, the seminars are going all week long. We've got Anna Livermore, back with us this time. Her presentation today is Steps to Production. She is the CEO and founder of Vmora. She's going to be talking about how bringing a new product to market and how to do it the correct way. So we do have a chat box, so if you have any questions, please include it there and we'll address them at the very end. Anna, take it away.
Thanks, Jason. So today we're going to cover the steps to production. There's a lot of steps, as you might already know that. So I'm going to run us through pretty quickly, but if you have any questions, type it in the chat box and we'll get to it at the end. So I hope you guys are all doing well. Hope you've been in our other presentations this week. They've been really great. We've gone over so much information. So I'm gonna bring us over to the presentation. Give me 1 second to screen share here. Okay. All right, so let me put us in presenter mode and we are good to go. Okay, so today we are talking about all the steps that goes into production. There's a lot. So I'm gonna do my best to give you the lowdown on what each step is and what you need to have ready or prepared. And basically you just need the information about what these steps are. I don't expect you to be your pattern maker, your sample maker, your pattern grader, your digitizer, your factory, but you need to know what these steps are so that you don't skip any. So I will get us started. I'm Anna Livermore from Vmora, and we are a company that helps launch fashion designers. I do one-on-one coaching where we build out timeline and costing and give you templates and kind of walk you through everything that you're going to need to do to launch your line successfully. We also do product development where we're doing patterns, samples, tech packs, those sorts of things. We do production management. We'll manage your production for you. We also do branding and social media and photo shoots. So everything that you're going to need as a new designer, we can take care of it for you, or we can teach you how to do it yourself. So that is me. And this has skipped to okay, so contact your factory. Actually, you know what? Let me run us through this one. Okay, so now that you've completed the stages of development, and those steps will be your fabric sourcing, your patterns, your samples. You'll want to, and actually I'm going to run us through the checklist really quickly so that we can see that. Let me stop sharing. I'm going to run you through the checklist for the production really quick so you guys have all of that information. Okay. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. So I have this nice little checklist for the steps of production. And if you guys are interested in that, this is one of the templates that we provide. Sorry about this, you guys. Luckily, we started earlier than we have in the past, so that's good. Okay. So I wanted to run you through the steps of production before we go into manufacturing, just because I feel like there's a lot of people that need those steps as well. And when I open up the presentation, it skips all of those. So I'm going to go ahead and bring all of that up for you guys, and we can run through what those look like. Okay, all right. Let me screen share here again. We're good to go. Okay. All right, so these are the steps of production, and this is like a little checklist. So if you guys want to screen print or screen share this and save it for your own, every time you go through production, you should go back to this list here and make sure that you're following all of these steps, because no matter how far you are along, you shouldn't be skipping steps. There's some that you won't have to spend as much time on season after season, but yes, these are the steps to production. The first thing you want to do every time you sit down to do your collection is you want to establish this mood board. So the mood board will help you keep focus of what is your collection, what are you looking to do, what are those initial thoughts and passions and color theories, and who are you as a designer? Because as a new designer, you're going to get caught up in all these new designs and new fads and new things that you want to produce. But if you go back to this mood board, you can say, does this fit what I was initially looking to do as for my first collection? Because it's easy to be like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do any red anymore. I want to do all blue. But I encourage you to stick to your original idea for your mood board, just to make sure that, you know, if you have other ideas, obviously we're super creative. We've got a ton going on. So you'll want to just stay on point. And if you have new ideas, new things that come along, you'll want to save that for next season, because eventually you might get to a point where you run out of ideas. So you'll want to make sure that you've got enough, even if you feel super inspired and you have like 30 designs and you want to launch it quickly in your first season, it's best to spread those out. So establish a mood board, stay on point, and figure that out along the way. Kind of time out the rest of your ideas and the rest of the things that come to mind. And that brings us into timeline. So developing your timeline is really important. And let me show you what we have in our timelines. Really quickly, I'm gonna stop sharing. But I'm gonna bring you through what we have for a timeline to show you guys as an example of this. How we do it. We put together what we call a flow sheet, and in that flow sheet it has all the information that we want to put together when we start production. Okay, give me 1 second. All right, let me screen share here. Okay, so this is what we are talking about when we are referring to our development. So the timeline here, what we have projected out is all of the steps that I'm running you through. So we start with the sketch, that takes a week. Fabric and trim sourcing, 3 weeks. Specs, sheet styles, and I'm going to run you through all of these steps as we go, but this is what it should look like. And again, we run this all through with our clients, but this is just an example of having all of the steps with the time allowed and when it overlaps with your branding and your photo shoot and your sales. So all of this should be developed upfront so that you're not planning something that is off, you know, if you planned a photo shoot and you don't have your samples in time, or if you're planning a launch. So sit down and do your timeline before you even get started, because you might find right away, oh, I wanted to launch a spring collection. And then you put all these steps together and you find out I'm going to be actually launching next year, not in 3 months. So putting together your timeline is step 2. And let me go ahead and pull up our other screen really fast. I just wanted to give you an example of a timeline. So okay. So we've got the timeline, and then after the timeline, you'll want to spend some time developing sketches. And in the sketches is where you have your croquis done, and you sketch out all of your designs. You'll want to sketch out, maybe if you're going to do an 8-piece collection, at least 16 styles, so that you can eliminate into your strongest 8. And having someone else run through that with you, somebody that has experience, is helpful, but sitting down, getting your sketches together. And then from there, you want your sketches confirmed and decided upon. So confirm your sketches, know which ones you're moving forward with. Try to talk to someone in the industry if you can about what they project your best sellers will be. It's not always going to be the most creative, the most avant-garde. It's usually really simple pieces and simple colors that sell really well. So you want to make sure that you have some basic in your collection, some simple pieces to wear, things like that. Even if you know, you still keep those more avant-garde pieces. Those will be great for photo shoots. They attract attention, but you want to have the more wearable pieces in your collection as well. So confirming your sketches, you'll then want to create style numbers. So style numbers, even if you're the only one that's going through and doing your patterns and your samples, it's going to help you stay organized season after season to have these style numbers ready to go. But if you are working with a different pattern maker, then sample maker, then digitizer, it helps because we're accustomed to referring to things by style. You might have a dress like that's the Caitlin wrap dress, and that makes sense to you and your customer, but when you're talking to your pattern maker or your sample maker, they're going to want to refer to it by style numbers. Size chart determined. So this isn't something that your pattern maker or your digitizer does for you. This is something that you want to have control over. So you'll want to have your size chart developed according to your customer. You know, whether that's whatever it looks like, you'll want to be sure that it is what your customer is used to. And if you're making up your own size chart, if it's something specific, like you're creating a line for X, Y, and Z, you'll have to develop that grade and those patterns accordingly. The next step is fabric slashing and trim sourcing. So that's what you're doing here. You're sourcing fabrics. You'll want to stay open-minded, because if you go into thinking like, this is exactly what I want to do and only this, you'll spend a lot of time looking for that fabric that you might never find. So what you want to focus on with this fabric sourcing is the hand of the fabric and how it feels, versus just having, you know, I need a black and white check of 80% poly, 20% cotton, whatever, because it's harder, it makes it more difficult for you. So focus on the hand of your fabric when you're fabric sourcing. Here's where you want to start your labels, your logos, and your hang tags. So this one here is, it's important because you want to spend time. This is your branding. So you'll want to spend time developing your logo, developing your colors. It's not something that you want to be like, oh my gosh, I'm ready for production and I forgot my labels. So you'll want that right away. So if you start that here before you start your patterns, you'll be ready for that. Then we've got the pattern, the prototype, and the sample estimates. So before, and this goes into budgeting, you'll want to do a full budget, but you'll definitely want to know how much are these patterns and samples going to cost. Then we got your first patterns created, and your muslins and your prototypes created. So the muslin is made out of it's just like, it's not the actual fabric, but it's just like a less expensive fabric. We can see the fit If it's a non-stretch, we can do that. But the muslin or the prototype should be created before your pattern or before your actual samples so that you can check everything. You'll have to hire a fit model. A lot of designers want to use their own fit model, or they want to be their fit model, which is fine, but you've got to make sure that you're perfectly fit into that size medium of your size chart. If you aren't, and let's say that your bust is a little bit bigger, all of your pieces are going to fit for someone with a bust bigger than the proportions you're providing. So you'll want to be careful about that. Also, an average height for production is in the 5'5" for women and 5'10" for men. Somewhere between 5'5" and 5'7" for women and around 5'10" for men. So again, if you're under that or above that, that's going to fit all your line according to your height instead of the national average height. Fabric and trim selection. So by here, you should know what you're ordering for fabric, and wash test your fabric. So this is really important. We talked about this in the 10 mistakes of designers, but you'll want to make sure you wash test your fabrics. So take a piece of fabric, cut a 12 by 12, or I'm sorry, cut, a little bit larger than a 12 by 12, draw in permanent marker in 12 by 12, wash it, dry it, take it out and remeasure it. So you want to make sure that it doesn't shrink any more than 4%. Otherwise, you'll have to find a new fabric or pre-wash your fabric before you cut and sew it. Here you can then establish your care labels. So you'll have your fabric, you'll know what the material is, so you can start your care labels. Then you'll do another prototype fitting. Then you'll do some pattern alterations if needed. Then we have in here 3 rounds of prototypes. That's a bit excessive, but if you're doing anything that's different or anything that you're developing, you'll want to spend more time in having these patterns and samples fit the way that you want it and be perfect to what you want. And if you're just doing a regular button-up shirt, it's not going to take you 3 rounds of prototypes to get that, but you want to just plan for it in case. You'll always want to book the same fit model all throughout. So that's important. And then once you've done your fittings and everything is great, you can go ahead and work on your finished patterns. So now the difference in that is this is where the seam allowances are added, pockets are added, linings are added. So it's a common misperception that when we're doing this muslin fitting or for sample fitting that they're going to be finished garments, but they're not. And the reason being is, what if we have to change the waist on the garment, and if it's already lined, then we're changing 2 patterns versus 1. So we'll want to make sure that it's perfect before we create that lining pattern, before we put the pocket on, before we put the zippers in. So this is where we finish out the patterns, and then we do this final sample fitting. Once you have your final sample, we can complete the tuck packs. Now we like to do our tuck packs after the sample's confirmed, because if you don't, and something changes in the specs, you're then having to go back and change that tuck pack. But if we have a perfect sample and everything's complete, then we can create that tuck pack and know it's correct. So then you'll want to get some manufacturing production quotes established. So going to different manufacturers, getting quotes. Again, we talked about this yesterday, about how you'll want to generate at least 5. And with those 5, there shouldn't be anything that's too low or too high, because that means maybe the factory is low on work, or they're too busy, or they're not familiar with your product. So you'll want to get some manufacturing quotes. And then you want to order your fabric and your trim for your size check run, also known as skewer. So that is, before you do production in your large, you'll want to at least make 1 large. You don't want to go into production and cut 50 larges and never have seen it. So that's why it's important to do a size check run. Not always, like if you use the same pattern again, you don't have to do this size check run, but you'll need to do it in the beginning. So you'll then digitize and grade your patterns. So your patterns to this point are usually paper patterns, depending on who you're working with. So you take those patterns and you make them digital, and then you grade them out accordingly, according to that size chart. Normally it's a 2-inch grade between sizes, small, medium, and large. And that just means if it's a 34 bust for the small, it's a 36 bust for the medium, and so forth. So grade your patterns. At this point, you can then establish your yields. So the yields are how much fabric per garment is needed exactly. And that's how you establish your cost, because you'll now know how much fabric is needed per garment. And then you want to create your markers. And this one is always really tricky. People don't always know what the marker is. So the marker is, imagine, I mean, like if you go to Vogue or something like that, they'll have those tissue paper patterns and you lay it out on the fabric and you cut them out. It's similar to that, but it's your pattern pieces all put together in like a Tetris format to save as much fabric as possible digitally. This is all done digitally. And then it's printed out, that's brought to your factory, and that's what's laid on your fabric to cut everything out. And every time you do a production, a new marker needs to be printed because they cut into that exact marker. After you have your markers created for your size check run, you can then finish out your costing, because we have everything to this point that we need: our yields, our fabrics, our trims, our care labels, everything's together so you can build that final cost. Then you'll want to do the size check run. I would suggest just doing that at the factory that's going to do your production, because it's doing two things. It's checking the quality of the factory and getting them familiar with your product, and then it's giving you those samples that you're going to need anyways. Then you'll want to establish your production run. What are you making? How many are you making? Quote that out. Then you'll want to confirm your fabrics, order your fabrics, do your production run, have your production run markers created, because remember, every time you make a marker, you need it reprinted. So you'll need another marker for production versus size check run. And then you'll oversee your production, and your production's complete. So I'm going to assume this brings us into our other presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this one up. But I just wanted to run you guys through those steps really quickly because they're really important. I assume a lot of you guys are new here. So just saying, oh, now we're at production, it might not resonate the way that it needs to be. So I'm glad that we had time to do that. I'm going to be mindful of our time because we've got a lot to cover. But the first step in your production, you want to establish your start date for production and all of your requirements and distribution capabilities. So that will be your tech packs, what they require from you to give you a perfect production. Also, you'll want to know if they have fulfillment options or if you will have to do fulfillment. Just ask the right questions. When can they start their production? How busy are they at the time? Things like that. Order your materials to your factory. So then, and this was in the prior step as well, or the sheet that we went through, you want to order all of your fabrics, your trims, your labels, have all of this ready already. The vendors are lined up. The labels are created. All you have to do is order them and have them delivered to your factory. And some factories will offer a full service. If they're offshore, they'll do a full service, but most factories domestically, you'll have to provide all resources for them. Sorry about that. And here's a production checklist. So factories, just for you guys to know, factories won't start until they have everything. So that means samples of each style, fabrics, trims, labels, tech packs, production markers, packaging, so all buttons, everything. That start date, the clock starts when they have everything in their hands that they need. It doesn't start when you ask them to, like, hi, can you do my production? And they say, sure, it'll be done in 6 weeks. That 6 weeks starts the day that they receive everything. So you'll want to be aware of that. So following up, if it's possible to ask for a top to make sure the stitching and quality is expected if the garment matches the sample given. So you definitely want to see a top before the production is started, always, always. I'm going to change that so it doesn't say if possible. You definitely need a top. So if they've never sewn your garment, what they'll do is they'll cut everything and they'll do a top of production. So that's where you confirm everything off on if the stitching is done, everything. You cannot change the pattern at this point. Remember that. That has to be done in the sampling process that we talked about before, and the fittings, the prototypes, and even in the size check run, although it's not ideal because your patterns are already digital. But by this point, you need to see a top before. If you've changed the fabric in any way, you know, I've seen different colors react differently to heat. So even if you've just changed the fabric, but the pattern's the same, like you'll still want to see a top. Always see a top. Make time for that. Check in to see how your production is moving along according to your timeline. So yes, you'll always want to be checking in and be nice. You always want to be checking in on your manufacturing and your production, because I say, and I'm sure you guys have heard me, you wouldn't drop off your child at kindergarten and pick them up at college graduation and expect them to have grown up properly. So make sure that you're checking in there. Packaging. So you'll want to make sure that if your factory is doing your fulfillment and your packaging, your tech packs, your folding specs, all of that, talk to them in advance. Because it's not necessarily, you can't assume that they're going to be taking care of all of this for you. And now I'm talking about the coaching. I just want to let you guys know we're running a promotion. So you can get 1 month of coaching for, instead of $2,000, $1,200. And in that 1 month, we can cover budget, timeline, tech pack. I have that flow sheet. So that's something that we would fill out together, set you guys up on your way so that you can be successful designers and have the resources and the templates and the checklists that you need. I'm OCD, all of that shows in these templates and checklists that I have. And planning for your production to be complete typically takes 6 to 8 weeks, depending on how large it is. The larger the production, the larger you want to plan. And you'll want to pay attention to the destination for the produced goods. So where is this going to go? Is this going to a fulfillment center, a distribution center? Is this something that you're going to be taking care of at home? So have that plan for your production once it's completed. And once it's completed, this is also important of doing the quality check, right? So you'll want to always plan to, if the factory says, yes, everything's going to be done October 1st, and you're like, great, and you tell all your stores, I'm shipping out October 1st, you'll have everything by October 8th. We don't want to do that. You want to give your factory time for quality checks. So let's say it's done October 1st. You want to give at least a 2-week window to do any quality check. Maybe labels on some of the garments got sewn in and they're loose, or a hem needs to be changed, or there's so many things that could happen in the quality check that you'll want to plan for that so that it doesn't put you under, right? If you have a bunch of orders and you tell them it's going to ship on October 8th, and you didn't plan for a quality check and it doesn't ship for 2 weeks from then you're in trouble and you might lose those orders. So always build in time for the quality check. It's very important to check every piece you ordered to ensure perfection. Factories will say they do this. So you want to have a third party there, if not yourself, to do this quality check. Before it leaves the factory, you'll want to count all the goods, and you'll want to inspect all the goods. And you don't have to inspect every single one. What we'll do is we'll check every 5 or we'll check every 10 to see how they look, and if they look good, and then we don't have to go through each and every one of them. But if we find something that's wrong with any of them, then we will check every single garment. So you'll want to make sure that you can do this. You don't want your factory shipping prior to you knowing that all of this is done. So you've done your quality check. I'm going to run you guys through. I always get asked to run through the steps again. So I'm just going to run you through really quickly if you're taking notes. So contacting your factory is number 1, asking them the questions that you need. Number 2 is ordering the material for your production to be delivered to your factory. Number 3, here is your production checklist on all of the materials that will be needed in order to do your production. So you'll want to sit down with this, make sure that everything has been ordered. Number 4 is doing this top of production doing a top of production prior to your full production run and confirming off on that, making sure it's exactly what you want. Number 5 is your packaging. So obviously you've talked to your factory about this already, but you'll want to start aligning that once your production has started. So this is also included in your tech packs. Planning your 6 to 8 weeks for completion, doing your check-ins during this time. After the completion, you do your quality check, and then you're ready to launch and sell. So there you go. I will also bring up that steps to production that we ran through prior to this, just in case anybody wants to take a look at that again. Okay. All right, so then we've got this here. Again, we've got the mood board, the timeline, sketches, style numbers, size chart, fabric swatch, and trim sourcing, labels, logos, hang tags, patterns, prototypes and sample estimates, first patterns, prototypes, fit model, order your fabric for your samples, wash test your fabric, get your care labels, do another prototype fitting, pattern alterations, hire your fit model again, do another prototype fitting, and then you'll finish your patterns, do your sample fitting, your tech packs, get quotes from your factories, and do your size check run. So there you have it. I hope that that was slow enough so that you guys could all see it. I'm gonna go to Q&A. So I've got one question. I've got some time. Jason, are you still there, or did you pop off?
I'm here.
Oh, okay. I couldn't see your video, so I thought maybe I was all alone. That's okay. Hi, good. That makes me feel safe.
Here's for you.
At what point during the process do you need to make sales or seek orders? Okay, so this one, it depends on if you're doing wholesale or if you're doing retail. And again, that flow sheet that I brought up will overlap your sales. So if you're doing wholesale, that happens 6 months before you deliver. So if you're selling wholesale for fall, you start producing orders of that fall in February, March, and April. So those 3 months are the selling windows. If you're doing direct to customer, the selling will be when you have your production, unless you're doing a pre-sale. Pre-sale meaning they're ordering the garments prior to you having them made, which a lot of my clients have been successfully doing. Any other questions? That was like a super ton of content. No other questions?
Chat. Let's see any. I want to give it a couple seconds.
You can ask me anything about production.
It does have a free 20-minute consultation.
Oh yeah, that too. If you guys are too shy to ask me a question, I give a complimentary 20-minute strategy session, so you can email me at Anna, A-N-N-A, @vmora.com to schedule that. Would it be possible to see the steps to production again? I'm assuming you mean that first checklist. So yes, I will go ahead and screen share this. Here you go. So I'll give you a few seconds. I assume you're screenshotting this. So here is the first, I'm sorry, this is the first page. And I can take some more questions while you guys do this, if anyone has any. Looks like, how do we contact you? Oh, Anna, A-N-N-A, @vmora.com. And then I'm gonna, oops, sorry about that. And then I'm just gonna bring this down to the second page so you guys can see it here. There you go. What if the factory is offshore and you can't do checks? Yeah, so ideally you hire a third person, a liaison between you and the factory in that country that speaks the language that can do the quality check for you. It's a big risk, especially with offshore, to have anyone shipping your goods across the whole ocean to you without doing this quality check by a third party. And there's companies that do that. So you'll want to do everything that you can to have that checked. If you can't have it checked, make sure that that sample, that top that you've seen is absolutely perfect and that they know to match that perfectly. How can you go back to this? You're going to record this and send it just like you have, and that there's recordings places too, right, Jason?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so there's recordings that you guys will get so you guys can rewatch this.
Yeah, I'll put the link here in the chat. It's
Perfect.
the ATSM Facebook page.
Great. Okay, do you think it's better to produce everything in-house versus getting your products made offshore? It's different. It depends on how many pieces you're making, what you're making. Every single person is different. So if you want to book that 20-minute strategy with me, I can give you more details about your product and what I think would be best for you. But it's really case-by-case basis. Where do you find good quality control agents in India? So I don't know specifically. We work with factories and our agents of places in India, so that could be helpful. But I don't know if there's, yes, so we can do that for you. What's a good approach to seeking out a reputable manufacturing companies? The best approach, I would say, would be, you know, if you're working with Vmora, I hate to say it, but if you're working with Vmora, we're going to hand select your factory for you based around our relationship with them, how many minimums you're making. So if you have someone that has experience with that factory and knows your product, that's the best way. It really is. Because otherwise you're taking a risk. If you haven't worked with them, you don't know their reputation. Maybe you've heard their reputation, but if you don't have any direct experience with them, it's best to work with someone that does. All right, so I will stop screen sharing so you guys can see us again. Does anyone have any other questions?
We had a couple more.
Oh yeah, so how do you start your sizing? Well, do some research in other brands. So other brands have their size chart just on their website. So take a look and see who is, what their size chart looks like, compare other size charts together of your competition or brands like yours, and begin to develop what you want to do. Try in their clothes and say, I really like this brand, but it's too big in the fit, so I'm going to use their size chart, but call their 6 their 4, something like that.
I think we have a few in the chat box.
That's where, chat box. Oh, chat box. Did I miss any, Jason?
Did you answer the swimwear one?
Yeah, what is the average cost for, say, a swimwear line? Again,
From
that one?
beginning to end, I think it was her add-on to that.
For what?
Just the tail end of that was from beginning to end. The average cost for a swimwear line.
Again, I don't have an answer for you, unfortunately. I don't know how many styles you're doing, what kind of fabrics you're doing, what kind of quality you're doing. So it's a really difficult answer for me to give you a cost. But again, that's what we focus on. It's not just like, oh, here's X amount of dollars and that will get you a swimwear line. It's actually a more involved conversation. And like I said, I have that coaching. If you're interested in that, we can take you through start to finish budget, from your samples to patterns to photo shoots to influencers to everything that you're going to need to get your launch set. But there isn't an average number. You could be doing 30 styles, you could be doing 2, you could be doing 100 units, you could be doing 5,000. So there's no average. But what I can say is it does take money to start a clothing company, because you'll have to pay for pattern samples and goods and photo shoots, things like that. So yeah.
Yeah, and again, this is a good opportunity for you to jump on with Anna for Anna for her 20-minute free strategy session. I included the link right there for everybody. So that's how you would get a hold of her for that. Yeah, it really is with any kind of apparel product. It really depends on, you know, the volume, the materials, where you're manufacturing, the logistics, the lead times, all that, right? That's gonna.
Yeah, and that's honestly, Jason, the #1 question I get asked.
No. Hard to answer, right?
How much does it cost to do a clothing line? And you know, it's just, you don't know. There's too many variables, but I do help them start to finish to be able to figure that out, you know, and it talks about like, well, how much money do you have? Like if you only have 5,000, it's going to cost 5,000, and I'm going to figure out how to make that most efficient for you and get you the largest return. But if you have $1 million, then we can do a clothing line for $1 million. A lot in budget or marketing and influencers and production, but it is also strongly relies on how much money do you have to work backwards off of, or how much money are you comfortable with spending.
Yeah, and for anybody listening that's just starting out or doesn't really have a handle on their market just yet, reach out to people like Anna about, you know, what you're trying to do, because, you know, having myself done a startup company before, you don't know what questions to ask, and sometimes just talking to a human being that knows what they're doing makes all the difference. You can avoid 1 or 2 very costly mistakes just by talking to someone. The fact that she offers a 20-minute strategy session is something that most companies don't offer anymore. Everything's going towards bot and virtual, so definitely take advantage of that. I think we had one more come in, a couple more come in. In regards to cost, what is customary for production factories to start your project? It's on the Q&A box.
Yeah, again, I don't know. They'll take a 50% to start your production and a 50% to deliver. What that actual cost is going to be rotated around how many pieces and units you're ordering.
A couple more below that.
Yeah, so would you have a list of pattern makers and such? So pattern makers, we make patterns, so Vmora can make your patterns. And we've got lots of templates and lists and vendor lists and fabric referrals and factory referrals that we offer within that coaching. So if you're interested in that, you can contact us, do that 20-minute, we can talk in more detail. Where can I get linen fabric in the US or linen thread? You know, I don't know the answer to that offhand. Because any linen that we work with comes from offshore. I don't know if there are mills producing linen domestically anymore. You can contact the US Board of Textiles, and they help you find US, and I don't know the exact website, but if you search, they do have a matchmaking process where they try and find vendors for you domestically before you take anything offshore. So that's through the United States government. I think it's a Board of Textiles, something like that. So spend some time on Google and see if you can't find someone that specializes in domestic services there.
Yeah, we also have a matchmaking function for the ATS.
Oh, you do? Cool.
Brand. Yeah. So for ATS Virtual, we have that assistance as well. But if your focus is more broad, and you're just trying to find suppliers or service providers, or sometimes we have a lot of relationships with trade organizations in different countries. The US, it's a little bit limited as far as what fabrics are being created here.
Yeah.
Most production, I think, Anna, you can contest this, is being done overseas for obvious reasons, but there probably are still a few. I don't know about linen though.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I know that there's cotton.
Yeah.
I know, there's
There's some activewear, a little bit of activewear, performance materials coming out of here.
I am not sure.
But yeah, for all the attendees, go on to appareltextilesourcing.com. We have a chat function as soon as you show up, and we actually have a real human behind that, not a bot. So, go ahead and ask your question, and we'll try to point you in the right direction.
Perfect.
So, awesome. I think, let's see. Yeah, again, for the linen question, probably best to...
Yeah, go to that matchmaker.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we are just about out of time. Anna, thank you so much again.
Thanks, Jason.
Very
I'll be
informative.
tomorrow at 1 o'clock about having a profitable fashion line.
Which is very important because we
Very
need that. So tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern, Anna will be back on talking about how to build a profitable fashion brand. Thank you so much, Anna. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Jason.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks for joining.